today our presentation, we're going to be covering who is responsible for your digital transformation. So I'm going to be your presenter today. If you're a regular attendee, you know I tend to be the regular presenter. So we've got a number of companies that we work with and are involved with in regards to digital transformation. Some of them you're probably familiar with. Of course, if you want to be involved in any way, you want to share maybe things that you've done in regards to the digital realm, or maybe you have some questions, that type of thing. We're always available for any of that. Or maybe even if you have a suggestion for a particular subject that you'd like covered, we'd love to hear that. So you can contact us at support@ketiv.com, or you can call us at 866-465-3848. We'd love to hear from you. So quick agenda. We're going to move quickly through this beginning portion so we can just get into it. Have a quick introduction. We'll have a quick poll, 30-minute max presentation covering who is responsible for your digital transformation. I forgot to take something off there. We're not going to do a prize on this particular one, and we'll have time for Q&A. So once again, I'm Josh. I'm a technical solutions specialist at KETIV, as well as a application engineer, and I've been in engineering and manufacturing for about 20 years. I've done everything from just general engineering of things like natural gas compressors or large air handling units, to doing manufacturing engineering, plant expansions, taking a company ISO and starting a quality department. So a wide range of things that I've done. So we'll go ahead and have a poll real quick. And while everyone has taken their time to answer that, we'll give a quick review of what we covered last time. So last time we had a guest, Greston, presented KETIV's efforts in regards to the digital transformation. And this was specifically, what are we doing in regards to the digital transformation? And with that, we've had a lot of improvements. We've made a lot of changes as we've moved through that. But the reality is you're never, and we are never really done moving through that. We've still got a long ways to go. We have a lot of things in the works. Some of this is just getting rolled out with more things along the way. In fact, had a discussion with the president and vice president of the company today about some things that could be done to further the digital transformation. So we're always looking for ways to improve. And the reality is no matter how far along we are, we can always improve and do better. And so that's what we're in the midst of. One of the key things that we wanted to illustrate throughout all that is the focus on data, right? We don't have a physical product. We do have a lot of things that we deliver. We do have digital products as well. We do consulting and different things. So a wide array of things, but no matter what is going on, there's always data that can be associated to it. And that was really the focus of our efforts and that whole presentation. So let's take a quick glance at the poll results to kind of get an idea of where people are at and kind of what their thoughts are. So we have a number of people that have a data manager of some sort, and then apparently some others that we did not list. But the good thing is it looks like most everybody has somebody identified. So people are moving along in that transformation, which is great to hear. So with this, we're going to start talking about leadership and kind of how leadership works. And you'll see I have this interesting image in the background here. For those, and I'm going to go ahead and plug a book It's not mine, but it's a great book. And it's a great book for anybody at any level in the company, whether they're the person on the floor or they're, very top president, CEO kind of a thing. And in that book was ultimately written by Jocko Willink, and it's called Extreme Ownership. And he was a Navy SEAL, part of, or the lead for SEAL Team 6, if I recall correctly. And he now does business consulting, utilizing the concepts that he learned in how to manage people and teams and so forth. And so in this book, he relays a story in which he really began to learn some of these concepts. And he was watching what's called the BUDS training for Navy SEALs, which stands for Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training. And after about the first 2 days of this training goes for about 5.5 days. 200 half of the 200 candidates had quit, right? So, of course, the point of this training is to really weed out and get down to the people that are absolutely cream of the crop, absolute best, right? And so he's watching this training at this point. At this point of the training, the remaining people had been grouped into teams of 7. And they were competing, these teams were competing against each other in a race. So basically they had this raft, it's a very heavy raft, and they would have to carry it to the water, get in, they'd row to a set point out in the water, they'd have to get out of the boat, and then they'd have to climb back in the boat, which is very difficult to do, very exhausting, particularly because the water is very cold. And once they're all back in the boat, they have to row back to shore, pick it up, carry the boat to the finish line. And they do this over and over and over again. Really difficult, really grueling. And as he's watching this, began to notice some things. So one, he noticed the results of the race, which there was one team who was consistently winning. They consistently came out on top, clearly were better than the rest of the teams. And there was another team that consistently came in last. And so as he's watching this, he's discussing it with others observing this training, they decided to change up the teams. In fact, what they decided to do was to change up the leaders. So they really kept the team structure, but the leader, each team has a team leader, and they decided to take the leader from the winning team, make him leader of the losing team, and take the losing team leader, put him on the winning team as the leader. And so with that, took a little time, but the results began to shift. Now, the winning team continued to perform well, but they were no longer the winning team. They still performed on top. They had a good foundation, but they were not the consistent winner any longer. The losing team soon became the winning team. And that's huge because you had the same people doing the same thing over and over and over. The only thing that changed was the leadership. And that is huge. It tells so much about what leadership is capable of. So let's dig in a little deeper here. So when boat crew 6 was failing under their original leader, that leader didn't seem to think it was possible for them to perform any better. And he certainly didn't think that they could win. This negative attitude infected his entire boat crew. As is common in teams that are struggling, the original leader of boat crew 6 almost certainly justified his team's poor performance with any number of excuses. His attitude reflected victimization. Life dealt him and his boat crew members a disadvantage, which justified their poor performance. Of course, this is an excerpt from the book regarding what they had observed. Some of the other things they had observed is just the aspect that the leadership was of this losing team was constantly finger pointing and blaming, right? Who was holding the team back, and focusing on the negative results and the negative aspects of performance. And interestingly, when given the opportunity to switch, he was all excited. He thought he was going to end up winning because it was the team that was at fault, not him, right? So let's read a little further. It says the leader and each team member of Boat Crew 6 focused not on the mission, but themselves, their own exhaustion, misery, and individual pain and suffering. When the leader of Boat Crew 2, that was the winning team, took charge of Boat Crew 6, he didn't wait for others to solve his boat crew's problems. His realistic assessment, acknowledgement of failure, and ownership of the problem were key to developing a plan to improve performance and ultimately win. Most important of all, he believed winning was possible. Rather than tolerate their bickering and infighting, he pulled the team together and focused their collective efforts on the single specific goal of winning the race. And so here we have spelled out for us the key difference, right? No more excuses. And you notice it's in a little bit different typeface here, that he believed winning was possible. And if you recall, if you've been with us before, a couple presentations ago, I really focused on that with culture change, the belief in a system or a plan or whatever it was. And we're going to cover that example here again in just a little bit to pull some different aspects out of it. So here's kind of an illustration of a concept or this concept that we're discussing, right? And the idea is working above the line or below the line. When the question is, which side are we on, right? If we're below the line, we're focusing on blame, excuses, which ultimately leads to denial, right? To deny the reality that we actually do have control, that we can do something about it, right? If we're blaming others, we're blaming situations, making excuses, the idea that he had just been dealt a poor team, right? Then he was in denial of the idea that he could actually do something about it, that he could change that team into a winning team. So of course, the idea is on above the line that we focus on ownership, accountability, and responsibility, right? And of course, the idea here is that we as individuals are doing this, right? Not forcing others, well, you're not taking ownership, right? Well, that's back to the blame, right? And excuses, right? That we take ultimate ownership, that we are accountable, and that we are responsible, or taking responsibility for the results and what is ultimately happening, whether that's winning or losing or reaching our goals or not. And so let's dig a little deeper here. So we're going to talk a little bit about the digital thread, right? This is about digital transformation. So we have all these different departments, right, that all are part of the company, but they're all kind of segmented, focusing on their own things, right? But they all produce data, right? So we have this data in the center, and they can all ultimately connect to that data, right? So the idea is that the data is centralized, it's accessible to everybody, everybody's feeding data in, everybody can pull data out, and we have this single source for all that information from which anybody can obtain whatever information they ultimately need. So we look at that, that's a lot of departments, and there's even more than that, right, that I didn't list. So a lot going on there, a lot to do, a lot to connect. And so with that, we get back to this whole idea of who is ultimately responsible for all of that, right? The answer is one aspect is everyone, right? everyone is ultimately responsible, right? Everyone is connected to the digital thread. Everyone benefits from the digital transformation, and everyone is a part of the company, right? But really, when we get down to it, the approach that we want to take is you, or in this case, when it comes to KETIV, me, right? I am ultimately responsible for the digital thread because I connect to it. I benefit from that digital thread, and I'm ultimately a part of the company. So I can take ownership, right? So then the question kind of becomes, well, what can I take ownership of, right? Is it just my piece? So let's kind of go back to this previous example that I had mentioned. So I'll run through this pretty quick. There was a new CEO to a company. They had reduced compensation, particularly for low producers, right? The managers, they said it was hard to keep their salespeople as a result. That the management doesn't understand how hard it is in the market, that management, or that this will ultimately push their salespeople to their competitors. The salespeople don't believe in the plan. And the statement was, frankly, I don't either, right? They don't believe in it. So the consultant basically asked, why is the leadership making this change? To which, well, they didn't really understand, but that then led to the questions, well, do you really think that management wants the company to fail? I mean, they just bought the company. Do they really want it to go belly up? Well, of course they don't. Everybody understood that. Do they really want to lose good salespeople? Well, I think the obvious answer is no, and the managers kind of got that, right? So the managers ultimately did not understand how or why this plan would help, right? So we'll continue this here. The new CEO, in speaking about the managers, said that they aren't pushing the plan hard enough. That, well, they just don't understand it, right? And that that the CEO has already provided explanation, and ultimately, if they have questions, then they could come and ask, right? To which the consultant kind of asked, well, are they intelligent? I mean, the answer was obviously yes, right? They've been successful thus far. They obviously know and have some level of intelligence to achieve success, right? Maybe they're not asking because maybe they're afraid to ask. And so the question then ultimately came down after all this is, who is ultimately responsible, right? Who is responsible? Because if you look here, we have a lot of pushing that down to the manager. Well, they're just not pushing it hard enough. They don't understand it, and I provided explanation, and they ain't coming and asking, right? A lot of denial, blame, and excuse, right? So the answer was ultimately, if it's not succeeding, then you can adjust your communication. You have the ability to enact change, that you're not helpless to your circumstances. If they're not asking and you don't think they understand, well, go ask them questions. Try to get an understanding of where they're coming from so that you can adjust your communication to help them to understand and ultimately believe in that plan. So, of course, that's a CEO level, right? So let's kind of look at, this is just a general example of a company, right? And maybe that company even has a digital transformation manager or a data management or document management team or person, right? And maybe, let's say you're way down here on the totem pole, right? Well, I'm down here. This is my realm. This is all I can really affect and do. And that's it, right? That's the typical approach, right? This is my department. That's their job. It's not mine. End of story, right? So, but the real question is what can you take ownership of? What is really within your realm of influence? Once again, the SEAL team leaders mentality became the mentality of the team. So at a bare minimum, if you're the bare bottom of the totem pole, you can still have an effect all the way up to the top, right? And change the approach and mentality of others. Why did these teams become successful? It's because they all took ownership and they all became leaders. They saw the ownership that the leader was taking and they followed suit. And if the leader wasn't taking ownership, they followed suit as well, right? And so maybe the digital transformation is not important. You know, the CEO or president of the company is, you know, doesn't think it's that beneficial, or you know, just hasn't even considered it. Well, there's opportunity there to have that influence. Does he not believe in it because maybe he doesn't understand it? Maybe you can adjust your communication. Maybe you haven't even communicated at all. Maybe step one is to just build a relationship with that person, whoever they may be. So there's always things that can be done, and things that you can take ownership for and make a change. And ultimately, the ultimate goal here is to affect change across the whole company and change, once again, the culture, right? We've seen so many times the ultimate effect that culture has to the success or failure of not just the digital transformation, but any project. And that is ultimately what we see with those SEAL teams, that what ultimately had a change and resulted in the winning team was a change in culture. So with that is the end of this week's presentation. We do have tomorrow a presentation detailing or covering simulation. And that's more of a technical technical presentation regarding specific software. We have those each Thursday. Those are really good for those that are, you know, ultimately using the software, you know, designers, engineers, and innovators that are deep into the software and its usage. And then we'll have another presentation in about a month. And of course, there's always opportunity to discuss and identify opportunities to improve and you know, change and make your business and manufacturing better. And then of course, we're always open to topic suggestions as well. So once again, here's the contact information. And while we have that up, we'll take a moment to open things up for Q&A if anybody has any questions or ideas or anything they'd like to share. So thank you all for attending, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.